Hey everyone. There are a couple of key risks facing any investor in the psychedelic sector. So, if you're investing in the main psychedelic companies, you're obviously exposed to the primary risk that all stock investors, all equities investors are exposed to, and that is what is called market risk or undiversifiable risk or systematic risk. So this is market-wide risk. It's the overall risk that the economy can crash, that there may be a recession or a depression either within your country, say the U.S., or wherever you are, or globally there could be a recession. So that's not something you can diversify away. So of course, equities investors that are invested in the psychedelic sector, of course, they're going to be exposed to that risk. But a prudent investor in the psychedelic sector like me, and of course this is not financial advice, but this is just a little bit of a discussion on good risk management practices in general, and specifically good risk management practices if you're a basic, an ultra high level primer on risk management practices if you're investing in the psychedelic sector like I am. Again, infotainment, not financial advice, don't be foolish. uh, but so of course you're exposed to this systematic and diversifiable risk, but there are other actual risks within the sector. We don't need to be talking about that high level risk. Everyone knows they're exposed to that risk. Generally, I mean, obviously you want to understand your exposure to that risk and whether that's appropriate for your overall approach investing strategy, but that's applicable everywhere. Now for the psychedelic stocks, if you're invested in MindMed, Atai, Cybin, Field Trip, Reunion, Compass, you're exposed to a whole different set of risks, a wild set of risks. So the main risk here, the first risk, in my opinion, is regulatory. So all these companies, their approach is to get FDA approval for therapies. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to get FDA approval. That's the way you get a drug approved in the U.S., and globally that's basically the highest standard for getting these drugs approved. And I think if they're able to get FDA approval, they're going to be able to get approval in Canada as well. So they're not going the recreational route, right? And I could talk a ton about that. I'll do a bunch of videos on that, discussing what I might just my general high level thoughts philosophically on that, and then as an investor in the sector, what I think about that. But generally, I think it's wise not to go through the recreational route. So if you're investing in MindMed, Cybin, Compass, any of these developers, do you want them to be like the marijuana companies? Basically, that once California legalized marijuana, now you have a bunch of publicly listed marijuana companies, and not only California, other states as well. Did these marijuana companies do well? Did you invest in any of these, or have you been following any of these? If you have, you'll see that they're not very profitable. They're like retail businesses. They're simply retail businesses. They're not mainly known for developing new novel drugs, and the payer, the one paying for the substance, is the customer. Somebody goes into a shop like MedMen, and they go into MedMen, they pay, they walk out with marijuana, and so it's a retail operation. You have all the retail expenses, and just everything that goes along with retail, and the payer, the buyer, um, is the actual user of the drug, and there is no additional value add. It's just like a random retail associate selling it to you. It's just not a very. It just ended up not being very profitable. That approach looks like it was a mistake, like an f up. So it wasn't that great, right? We from a purely investing perspective, we don't want to do a retail thing where like people are going buying retail mushrooms. Think about how not profitable that would be just from a purely investing perspective. Now, if I put on my humanist hat, I'll say I would be happy. I would say, whoa, I don't think that the only way people should obtain these therapies and medicines and like mind altering substances that promote deep self development and self improvement. I don't think the only way should be through through a doctor or prescription. I think adults should be more free, especially in North America, to do these things, to open their minds and alter their minds and expand themselves, especially with these sacred and profound and medicinal substances. But as an investor, if you're come on, if you're gonna be how often are you gonna be tripping on mushrooms? Say you do it intensely. You're doing a 2 3 year therapy for yourself, and you're doing it quarterly. Every 3 months, you're doing a trip. Well, how much is that gonna cost? It's $100 worth of mushrooms. What is that? It's nothing. How much do you need? Who's gonna be making money off you like that, right? So MedMen at least will be selling you marijuana on a weekly or monthly basis. They have cool drinks. You do it more often, but you're not gonna be doing psychedelics that often. Period. Um, and so there's less money there, right? It's just the retail approach won't even work. And even if it did, right, with marijuana, with all the cool drinks, all that they're trying to do, it still isn't that profitable, the retail approach. So you want the payer to be a third party who has a ton of money. You want that to be the payer, and that is going to be the insurance companies. And you also want to add value through therapy and having a complete package around the therapy, which is needed in our modern society and civilization, kind of, because we've completely lost the communal, the tribal, the local knowledge that used to exist when people used to do psychedelics more often. We just don't have that in our society, so it needs to be provided, especially at first, by in a good setting like that. So the kind of and a good example of that is the ketamine therapies that Field Trip Health is engaging in right now. Then now they're starting to do at home therapies, but generally it was like I think you pay on your own. Uh, I don't even think insurance would reimburse you, but they try to approach it like an insurance reimbursement. But the goal from all these things is to have insurance reimburse for the treatment. Um, and that's why these companies are trying to get FDA approval, right? So it's going to be expensive. It's going to be thousands of dollars, right? Thousands, hundreds or thousands of dollars for these treatments. That's how it's going to have to be, I think, at first. And so that, that was a big bit of a tangent there. But so we're talking about the risks here. Let's go back to the main line here. So that's why that's the whole point. That's the context behind FDA approval. What if FDA approval doesn't happen? What if something happens where we're not able to get FDA approval? They don't even allow phase three, or there are phase three, but they don't. They just something changes culturally, something twisted and perverted happens, like it happened in the 70s and 80s, where the country changes and there's no FDA approval. Then that's it. These companies are gone, right? So if you're betting all in, that's a huge risk. You have to make sure you know what you're doing. Or you really want to be all in on this, something that's so there's a very plausible potential scenario in the future where it could go to zero. Now, if you told me stocks will go to zero generally, I'd say, what are you talking about? The whole economy is going to go to zero. If you said the tech sector is going to go to zero in 2020, in the 2020s, I'd say, what are you in the 90s now, thinking that the tech sector is going to go to zero? Come on, give me a plausible explanation of why you think the tech sector could possibly go to zero. It's an implausible thing, but I can easily give you a plausible, very reasonable explanation of why the entire psychedelics sector, this new beautiful psychedelic sector, could go to zero. No FDA approval. A corollary, a related aspect, a related consideration to that is the idea that the FDA approval may not become relevant if the national sentiment around psychedelics changes again, like we did in the 70s or 80s, and stigmatized. And I hope that doesn't happen. It doesn't seem likely to happen, but that could happen. That's another major risk. So if there are risks where it looks like these are not going to be widely used therapies, then these things basically go to zero, right? These things, the potential for these things to 100x or 1000x is derived from the possibility that these drugs, these therapies, these medicines will be approved by the FDA, and insurance companies will be paying tons of money to the producers of these substances, or in the case of Field Trip, the actual kind of almost quasi retail distributors with a therapy kind of package around it, that they'll be paying those people. So that's kind of that. Those are the two major risks, and you can kind of say they're one risk, right? That the that none of the stuff can pan out. That none of the stuff can pan out. That nothing is a sure thing when we're investing. I remember when I was just getting out of my teens, right? Back in during the Great Recession period, before the Great Recession hit, I invested in Washington Mutual. I remember a buddy of mine worked there, and he started investing in it, and he's like, "Oh, this stock's great. It's a sure thing." Um, and he's like, "Washington Mutual is such a big company. If it goes under, everything will go under. Like the whole economy is going to go under. How could Washington Mutual possibly go under?" Well, today Washington Mutual doesn't exist, right? Just a year or two after, like around 07, 08, '06 actually, I think even '06, '07, Washington Mutual went bankrupt. My entire investment went bankrupt, went to zero. That was a key lesson, where a lot of people think that, oh, something really bad has to happen for this company to not work out. Well, yeah, bad things have happened. I got burned badly there with that Washington Mutual play back like a decade and a half ago, and it taught me it taught me a lot. It taught me that nothing is a sure thing, and you can't be confident about anything. That tomorrow can be way worse than the previous kind of historical averages or previous historical kind of worst scenarios, and you can't count on tomorrow being like yesterday, right? Especially especially after everything that's happened in the last few years. We've seen how volatile the world is, how complex and interconnected and volatile the world is today. So um, I love the sector. I love the psychedelic sector deeply. And I think this is a big generational wealth opportunity over the course of the next decade or two. Again, not financial advice, just entertainment. Be careful. Don't listen to people online that don't know you, that don't have any responsibility towards you, and that can't give you particular idiosyncratic advice. This is just entertainment, and all the things I say here are just my own opinion. But I do think that these are potential generational wealth opportunities for myself, where I think in 2040 the market caps of these companies on average are gonna 100x at least, if if we get FDA approval, and I believe we will get FDA approval given what I know about these substances. So I see that, I know what I know personally about these substances. I think these are going to be very beneficial, and I think they will be approved. I think the tide has turned, and I think there's a minimal risk of it turning back, but there is still a risk. Everything I said is still true, but I think the if it happens, see, there's a probability attached to both aspects. There's a probability attached to it not happening, and there's a probability attached to it happening. Maybe 50-50, let's say. Maybe 70% probability that it happens, let's say, and 30% that it doesn't. But mathematically, if it happens, the reward is so large, so the expected outcome is quite large, right? Assuming you're able to tolerate that enormous risk, that 30%, right? If you can't tolerate it, if your goals are different, if your age is different, if your income, life approach, obligations, there's so many things, just your own idiosyncrasies, your personal internal level of anxiety, and just comfort taking on risk and experiencing volatility with your portfolio. If if you don't take that into account, you're not gonna be able to tailor your approach. There's no one size fits all thing. So it may be appropriate for you not to invest anything in the psychedelic sector. And if you're a college kid who has your whole world ahead of you and you have just barely any money now, maybe a very large percentage would not be inappropriate. Where, like, even for me, somebody who deeply believes in this sector and has a YouTube channel on it, even for someone like me, if you found out that, oh, I have that much in psychedelics, you would say, yeah, that's inappropriate. Too much of your net worth at this stage in your life, too much of it is in the psychedelic sector. But maybe for a college kid who only has $1,000, maybe it's not too much. So It all depends. It all depends what stage you're at. It all depends what obligations you have and what your kind of expenses are. It depends on a lot. So you have to be very prudent. But in summary, like the video. Please like the video and comment. I'm sure I can improve the quality of my videos, the quality of my delivery. I want to make these videos great. So if you've listened to the end of this, then you're amazing. Then you're amazing. Thank you. Like this, subscribe, and tell me how I can do better and what else I could talk about. Thanks.